Marijuana, the dried leaves and flowers of the Indian hempweed, is used in the form of a cigarette. Marijuana smoking, experts point out, can make a helpless addict of its victim within weeks, causing physical and moral ruin and death. Should you ever be confronted with the temptation of taking that first puff of a marijuana cigarette, don't do it.
Anything to get a blast, anything to bomb his mind, hotheads. They think they can go out and get high. They think they can get turned on with pot. They can get loaded, they can get stoned. "57% of the student body was smoking pot. Smoking pot, pot, pot. It fascinates and then assassinates and then it kills. A drug epidemic that's sweeping our nation. Anything to get a kick, anything to get a blast, anything to bomb his mind. Quit playing games with God.
Although people around the world have been smoking marijuana for thousands of years, the custom only reached the United States at the beginning of the 20th century, when it arrived in the Southwest with a wave of Mexicans looking for work.
Piper's Place. Next.
To these poor laborers, smoking marijuana was a way to relax after a long day of working in the fields. But white Americans along the border didn't much like these foreigners or their strange customs. Marijuana, it was rumored, gave the Mexicans superhuman strength and turned them into bloodthirsty murderers. One evening in El Paso, some white Texans were allegedly attacked by a Mexican that went crazy on the killer weed. Moving swiftly, the El Paso City Council passed a law banning possession of marijuana. Supposedly designed to control marijuana, the law quickly became a way for the city to control Mexicans. Unlike the people of El Paso, most Americans had never even heard of marijuana. They were more concerned about the rising addiction to opium, morphine, cocaine, and heroin, which were all serious public health issues. But instead of treating drug addiction as a public health problem, the federal government put control of these drugs in the hands of the Treasury Department, who created the Federal Bureau of Narcotics.
Rolling!
This is Harry J. Anslinger, Commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics.
Oh, sorry.
The Treasury Department intends to pursue a relentless warfare against the despicable, dope-peddling vulture who preys on the weakness of his fellow man.
America's first drug czar was Harry J. Anslinger. A law and order evangelist, Anslinger would shape America's attitude toward marijuana for generations to come. Like many Americans, Anslinger was a prohibitionist. These morally correct citizens sincerely felt that progress could only be achieved by controlling the depraved impulses of the masses.
Swordfish.
He believed that if the laws were tough enough, America could be rid of alcohol, put enough people in jail, and eventually the public will learn to behave. And he applied this same philosophy to mounting the government's war on drugs.
Special Treasury agents are part of a massive force created solely to control the traffic in narcotics.
You got any merchandise obtained in Canada or abroad? No. Have you any liquor? No. Get out of the car and let's take a look at it. Come on.
Move over, J. Edgar Hoover. Here come the agents of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics.
Like J. Edgar Hoover, Anslinger posed for the cameras, creating the impression he was smashing one major dope ring after another. But he found out pretty quickly that policing 48 states on a depression-strapped budget was impossible. His solution was to try to convince the states to police local drug traffic themselves. Campaigning tirelessly, he lobbied each state to sign a joint agreement to commit state resources to fighting drugs. But only 9 states signed on. The other 39 viewed it as federal interference in their affairs. It was a major defeat for the young drug commissioner, but he wasn't the type to give up. Meanwhile, marijuana, carried by West Indian sailors, arrived in port cities like New Orleans. Known as muggles, tea, or reefer, it was popular with the jazz crowd because it made music sound so good. From here, musicians carried it up the Mississippi to urban centers in the north.
Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Have you ever met that funny reefer man? If he says he swam to China, wants to sell you South Carolina, then you know you're talking to that reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Oh, that funny, funny, funny reefer man. If he trades you dimes for nickels, he says watermelons are pickles. You know you talking to that reefer man. Or have you ever met that funny reefer man? Oh, that funny, funny, funny reefer man. He smokes a reefer, he gets high, then he flies to the sky. That funny, funny, funny reefer man.
With marijuana showing up in the big cities, Anslinger realized it might be the answer to his problem. If he could persuade white America that marijuana was a deadly menace, frightened voters might push their state legislators to sign on to his Uniform Narcotics Act.
know what you want. You want to kill me.
In this case, the state waives trial of the defendant, Ralph Wiley. It is convinced that he is hopelessly and incurably insane, a condition caused by the drug marijuana to which he was addicted. It is recommended, Your Honor, that the defendant be placed in an institution for the criminally insane for the rest of his natural life.
I see no reason why the request should not be granted.
Wrap your chops round this stick of cheese. Blow this game and get high with me.
Determined to get the act passed, Anslinger unleashed a media campaign to make the public believe that this little-known plant growing at the side of rural roads was the biggest threat America had ever faced.
Parents, beware. Your children, homeward bound from school, are being introduced to a new danger in the form of a drugged cigarette, marijuana. A Chicago mother watching her daughter die as an indirect result of marijuana addiction told officers that at least 50 of the girl's young friends were slaves to the narcotic, continuing addiction until they deteriorate mentally, become insane, and turn to violent crime and murder.
Extra, playground dope addicts, we all about marijuana, cut sister's throat.
Anslinger's campaign was tailor-made for the lurid tabloid press and supported by an army of moralist groups that captured the public's imagination.
Movie Tome News, covering the world to bring you the news.
He's a man that smokes that job will take you for a ride. Wonders if he's still alive when you smoke that killing job.
America is threatened by a new drug menace. Street corner vendors whose stock in trade is the deadly loco weed marijuana pass it out in cigarette form. From ingeniously concealed containers, the reefers go to the waiting hands of deluded youngsters.
Police find a city backyard full of dope. This innocent-looking weed is Mexican marijuana, which when smoked produces more nightmares than opium. Captain Mooney of the narcotics squad will tell us something about it.
The constant use of these marijuana cigarettes causes temporary insanity.
Yes,
let's go, Jack. I'm red hot.
Our state voted for the Uniform Narcotic Act, and so should yours.
The propaganda campaign was successful beyond Anslinger's wildest dreams. One by one, state after state signed on.
When you smoke that killing job.
Gentlemen, take your seats.
But now, frightened out of their minds, the American public demanded that the federal government pass new laws to fight marijuana. Terrified voters wanted action, and their government responded. Without any public debate, scientific inquiry, or political objection, the Marijuana Tax Act was signed into law by President Roosevelt. The act prohibited possession of marijuana anywhere in the United States without a special tax stamp from the Treasury Department. And the Treasury Department didn't give out any stamps, effectively making marijuana illegal. Overnight, a new class of criminals was created.
To the Treasury agents of the Bureau of Narcotics comes the job of wiping out this traffic. And in 1937, we smashed 10 major narcotic rings. Only the cooperation of an awakened public will make the hell of it.
first person to be convicted was Samuel R. Caldwell, a 58-year-old Denver man. Sentencing him to 4 years hard labor at Leavenworth, Judge J. Foster Symes said, "I consider marijuana the worst of all narcotics. Under its influence, men become beasts. In the future, I will impose the heaviest penalties. The government is going to enforce this new law to the letter."
All the jive is gone.
Prohibition cannot be enforced for the simple reason that the majority of American people do not want it enforced and are resisting its enforcement. That being so, the orderly thing to do under our form of government is to abolish a law which cannot be enforced, a law which the people of the country do not want enforced.
New York's prohibition-fighting mayor, Fiorello LaGuardia, was somewhat skeptical of the government's claims that marijuana was causing murder, rape, and the destruction of America's youth. Wanting to get the facts, he commissioned a study by a group of 31 impartial scientists. After 6 years of medical and sociological research, the LaGuardia Commission found smoking marijuana did not lead to violent or antisocial behavior. Smoking marijuana did not cause uncontrollable sexual urges. Smoking marijuana did not alter a person's basic personality structure. Item by item, the Commission's report disproved every negative effect claimed by Harry Anslinger. Furious, Anslinger used his influence with the press to have the report discredited and destroyed every copy he could get his hands on. And by restricting the supply of marijuana, he put a stop to any further research. Not taking any chances, Anslinger ordered his men to dig up dirt on anyone who disagreed with him. And going on the offensive, he targeted the entertainment industry, which he saw as a degenerate moral influence.
I told you I'd wait until he was grown. Well, now he's growed and he gets his legacy. Only it's made out of hemp.
Dreamed about a reefer 5 feet long.
Not wanting any trouble with the government, the Hollywood studios agreed to give Anslinger personal control over all movie scripts that mentioned drugs. And movies he felt sent the wrong message were just banned.
The queen of everything.
Of ice cream cones and chocolate sodas. Youth is a time for getting a job, for finding one's place in the world. But sometimes in these troubled days, the very thoughtlessness of youth has led to a living nightmare. Addiction to drugs,
What's that? H? H? What's H? That's a lot. It's heroin. Will it make me sick like the reefers did?
Marty's story is like many of the others. It started with marijuana cigarettes.
Come on, it's my turn next. Gee, Duke, where'd you get him?
I know a guy.
3 for $1.
Let me try.
He was determined to be one of the gang if it killed him. And it almost did. Several weeks later, after smoking reefers, Marty's befogged brain hit on a clever way to open pop bottles. Later, Stan went to the hospital for swallowing broken glass. Marty badly cut the inside of his mouth, though he didn't even know it at the time. Before long, Marty was hooked, physically dependent on heroin. Nothing mattered but the ever-present craving for the drugs. He had given up interest in everything else.
By the early 1950s, concern about marijuana was overshadowed by a new media scare: rising heroin addiction among teenagers who were drifting into crime to support their habit.
I want some money, old Sam.
But you're crazy.
The money!
I know you. They'd put you in jail.
Just get the money!
No, please, no!
This heroin scare gave an aging Anslinger a new way to attack marijuana and respond to anyone who might
or experiments with it, acts exactly like a person who loads the gun, puts a bullet in, puts it up to his head, very carefully, hopes for the best, and pulls the trigger.
Please stand by.
Teenage narcotic addiction. Is there an answer?
Have your name, please? Robert M. Conlon, Commander of the Detective Bureau, Culver City Police Department, Culver City, California.
Is there any general personality traits that would apply to addicts?
Well, yes. Most of these addicts are very sick, and they are a menace and have to be arrested. I get a lot of self-satisfaction arresting those people.
And what about teenage addiction? How does that come about usually?
They start out by using marijuana.
And do most marijuana users finally go on the hard stuff?
Yes.
What kind of changes could be made to improve the narcotic situation based on present knowledge, Bob?
Well, Paul, the addict is a sick guy. And anything that could be done through legislation to make the penalty far greater, I am sure would be appreciated by every cop on every beat throughout the country.
Your name, please? Harry J. Anslinger. And your position and occupation? Federal Commissioner of Narcotics.
Appearing at the Kefauver crime hearings, Anslinger backed Senator Hale Boggs' proposal to increase penalties for all drug offenses. Tougher penalties were needed, he said, because behind every narcotics peddler, there was a communist preparing to overthrow our government.
According to all the documents that we have been examining today, the major source is Red China.
And do you see a marked increase in the amount of drugs circulating in this country which you believe come from Red China since China went communist in 1949?
Oh, very much so. Under the nationalists, they had the situation pretty well under control. There were about
1,000 executions a year under the nationalist Chinese government. I haven't heard of anyone being wounded under this regime.
Even though there was absolutely no proof of a communist plot to dope up America, the country was in the grip of Cold War hysteria, and no politician could afford to look soft on communism. Taking Anslinger's advice, President Truman signed the Boggs Act, which dramatically increased penalties for possession and ordered mandatory minimum sentences.
There's a considerable amount of heroin coming out of China.
You mean Red China?
Red China, yes. And,
on a roll now, Anslinger agitated for even tougher laws and got President Eisenhower to push them through Congress. The Narcotic Control Act put marijuana in the same category as heroin and made it subject to the same penalties. A first conviction for possession was punished with a mandatory prison term of 2 to 10 years. In addition, a number of states added their own penalties. In Missouri, a second conviction for possession could get you life.
This is Lieutenant McGee, Atlanta Police. This is Lieutenant McGee, the Atlanta Police Department. We got the stuff right away before the man had a chance to distribute it.
Do you think this stopped the entire operation?
Yes, sir. I'm sure of it.
Have you ever seen anything like it before?
No, sir. Not in my career. I haven't seen that much marijuana.
Okay, I'm going to get a different lens on you here. A little tighter. Does it sound pretty good? Yeah.
Setting his sights higher, Anslinger went to the UN and used America's influence to persuade over 100 countries to consolidate their various drug agreements into a single, inflexible convention outlawing marijuana around the world. This was the ultimate achievement in Anslinger's relentless crusade to criminalize marijuana use.
To Harry Jacob Anslinger, distinguished citizen, in your dedicated efforts to combat the illegal traffic in narcotic drugs, you have fashioned an effective organization to pursue this objective. Your noteworthy achievements in this field have earned for you the respect of the world community. Signed, John F. Kennedy.
In leaving the bureau he'd built up under 5 different presidents, Anslinger warned his successors of an impending drug revolution, which he felt would be nothing less than an assault on the foundations of Western civilization.
Responsibility only to oneself. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of pleasure. The new Declaration of Independence for the teenager around the world.
On campuses across the country, a whole new generation discovered drugs. Rebellious and willing to experiment, they found they liked altering their consciousness.
Do you smoke pot?
Yes, I do.
Do you smoke marijuana?
Yes.
Do you smoke pot?
I've been smoking pot for about a year.
Have you found it addictive?
Oh, no. I go for months and months without smoking it, and then I'll smoke a lot, maybe in a week.
Well, the argument is made that pot leads to the addiction to heroin or other narcotics. Have you found this to be so among the people that you know?
No, not at all.
The people who use the stronger drugs, the opiates, etc., are not the people who smoke marijuana, and the people who smoke marijuana do not use the other drugs.
Gradually, the perception that marijuana was dangerous began to change. Many students saw smoking grass as a rejection of establishment values, a way of declaring their independence.
To the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. The last 18 months has seen a tremendous increase of the so-called hippies. This is a protest against the middle and upper class people of San Francisco, in fact of the area. It is the belief of the people who live within the area that we, the middle class, have done a very, very poor job in running our government and our way of life.
This weekend, Jefferson Airplane on Friday, Grateful Dead on Saturday, the Carousel Ballroom, high above Market and Van Ness.
Anybody hungry?
Hey, how about we order some Chinese?
Order some Chinese to do what?
Federal Bureau of Narcotics, please hold. Federal Bureau of Narcotics, please hold. Federal Bureau of Narcotics, please hold.
The new head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, Henry Giordano, began to realize he had a problem. To address it, he developed a campaign he hoped would be believable to the younger generation. If you smoke marijuana, you will become an unmotivated, dysfunctional.
Started smoking pot.
If you become a pothead, you risk blowing the most important time of your life, your teenage. That unrepeatable time for you to grow up and to prepare for being an adult that can handle problems and make something meaningful out of life. Or you have the choice to have the courage to see and deal with the world for what it really is. Far, far from perfect, but for you and for me, the only one there.
Because so many were trying marijuana without any ill effects, the public demanded to know more. And for the first time, the federal government approved scientific testing.
The plain fact is that none of us know very much about this drug in any verifiable way. Well, Bill, it's been about 2 hours since you got the drug. How do you feel?
Fantastic. Defiant? Not at all. Businesslike? Not at all. Sheesh. Friendly? Extreme. They sound ridiculous.
Would you be interested in taking part in a study like this again and having the same type of drug?
Sure.
You would. It's been a very pleasant experience for you.
I'll do it anytime you want.
Do you think it would be...
Any time at all.
Do you think
Just
it would be...
call me any time of the day or night.
We found out that the drug makes people happy, it makes them intoxicated, and finally makes them sleepy, which is about what marijuana users were telling us happened all the time.
Hey, last call, folks. Drink it up. Oh, it's nice to see you, Bob. How's the wife, huh? Kids are okay? Good. That's right. Let's drink to tomorrow. Hell, let's drink to tonight. Hell, let's drink.
It says right here that alcohol does more harm to your nervous system.
Stop reading that underground trash and pay more attention to your homework.
All that drivel they talk.
Whether the younger generation was presented as drugged-out hippies or anti-war protesters, conservative America reacted with a fear and hatred that threatened to pull the country apart.
This is Fire Support Base Aries, 50 miles northeast of Saigon. Vito is a 20-year-old draftee from Philadelphia. A photographer before he entered the Army, Vito is now a squad leader, responsible for the lives of a dozen men.
Well, it's a 12-gauge shotgun. What we basically use it for on the LZ and I guess even out in the field, so if you want to know. Is that we use the shotgun from a ball. You know, you just put the ball in the chamber and all. Paul, let me borrow that ball from you. I heard this is probably all SIDS and we're getting busted, but I don't care.
Shotgun. What's happening here is also happening to some extent at virtually every other American installation in Vietnam. Recent surveys estimate that well over 50% of the soldiers in Vietnam use marijuana.
You get really stoned. Then, you know, who cares about the war? This war.
It is time for an honest look at the problem of order in the United States. So I pledge to you, we shall have order in the United States.